I'm Dr. Soluri, in case you don't know me yet. Um, I'm sorry? Okay. You ready? Okay. Hi, I'm Dr. Soluri. Again, still Dr. Soluri. Um, and I was asked to talk to you today, and I just thought one day, Dr. Abraham and I were walking, and I was sharing with her my experience about when I started out in medicine, and she said, "You should share that with the students." And so here we are. So I graduated, for those of you who don't know, I graduated podiatry school, the New York College of Podiatric Medicine in 1989, way back in the day, with my husband. And at that time, podiatry residents really didn't do, many of us didn't do residencies. You were lucky if you got one. There were very few and they paid very little. And when I mean very little, to give you an idea, my husband did get one. He got paid $105 a week and he worked 100 hours a week. So a dollar an hour. My how times have changed. We have new laws that protect you from working that many hours and from getting paid that little now. Um, but at that time, we were both trying out for residencies, and we graduated together. And he got one, and I didn't. That was my first big. If I had to say my first failure, that was my first kind of failure. My first moment in my life that I had not achieved what I set out to do. Like most of us, I think when we're science majors, we work really hard to get that A, and if we have to settle for an A minus or a B, we do, but not happily. And I surely had never put my mind to anything and not gotten it before academically. So I was crushed. And my husband thought this was a great opportunity for us to do different things, for him to go and do the residency, and I could open our office because you could just open an office cold then. And I had worked for podiatrists for a lot of years, so I thought I knew what that meant. And so I went and opened my practice. Foolishly, I might add. It was difficult to buy a practice at that time, and it was even more difficult to get a job as a podiatrist. Now they have that in all of our fields of medicine, pretty much. There are companies that run um, Watson Clinic and things like that. They're owned by companies, and the doctors are employees. At that time, most doctors didn't. We were self-employed. And so I went and we rented a space and hung out our shingle and renovated by our own sweat the place into beautiful rooms where I spent way too much money worrying about what somebody would think the room looked like, and sat and advertised and waited. Because at that point, what else do? You don't really have patients. So little by little, we had some family and friends that kind of came anyway just to help out. But the truth was that we weren't really financially in a good position. And he was making $110 a week. I don't even know how we were living. My God bless my in-laws, they fed us most of the time so that we ate at their house. And I realized how little I really knew about business because they teach you about medicine. But I have to say, if there's two areas that they really don't teach you in medical school enough of, is business, on how to run your practice and your financial life, by the way. So even if you're an employee now, um, you're a grown up and standing on your own a lot of times for the first time, really, when you graduate school. And those loan payments come much sooner than you think. And then to top that all off, we were newly married and very different people. And so we were really kind of struggling in every capacity there was. And I'm thankful for that because it brought me to the Lord. That was what really brought me to my knees. To say I was prideful, I still, of course, we all do, but I still really struggle with that. Being successful gives you a sense of pride, and that's a good thing in a way, but too much, knowing that it comes from the Lord is what's important, and I didn't know him then. So I felt like I had done everything that people told me to do. I had gone to school, got a good education, right? I became a doctor, just what they tell you to do. And I married a good man, except that we were fighting so much, we were barely talking half the time. And I was just as, he had anger issues and I was just as bad. So it was a bad combination. And that's what brought me to my knees. And finally, I literally had $7. I'll never forget this night. I had $7 in my wallet, and the bridge to go to the prayer meeting with my sister was $5. That meant I had $2 left to my name, like nothing in the bank, nowhere to go for money. That was it. And that was the night I accepted the Lord. And I'd love to say like that changed everything. And it did spiritually for me. But financially, I was still in the same mess that I was in. And thankfully, I started praying for my husband, and that brought, he eventually came to the Lord just reading the Bible to prove me wrong. God has a funny sense of humor. And that's how he got saved. But we made some really huge mistakes when we started. Like I said, the other area, by the way, besides your financial area of what you don't know enough about, is nutrition, because they really don't teach it that much. Most doctors, even today, get very little on that. And that's an area that's sadly lacking, that now has become such an experimental and researched area that I really think we need to probably change some of our med schools to reflect that. But there we were. I think after our first year in practice, so now it's the end of our first year, and we realized things we're crashing hard. And I happened to meet a woman who offered me a job in our town. She was a local podiatrist in the town, and typically podiatry was very, very competitive. There's a lot of them, like kind of like dentistry here in Florida. I would guess there's a million of them, right? So it was very competitive. And she asked me if I would be willing to do house calls for her, that she had a practice, and if I could do house calls for her, then, she would pay me, and I remember it was $25 an hour, which seemed amazing to me at that time. Absolutely. So one day a week, I did house calls for her. She was pregnant, so she couldn't do them, the house call part of it, and I fell in love with house calls. That, to the day I retired, was my favorite part of my practice. There's something very personal about when you go into someone's home to take care of them, and they love you forever because they know that it's such a great thing to have a doctor come to their house. So we did that. I started working for her, and then she started giving me some time in the office. She started giving me more days, and then she came to me and Ray, and then I got pregnant, and he took over doing the extra day a week. And she said to him, "Hey, I'm moving. My family lives out of state, and we're moving, and I would love to sell you guys the practice." And we bought the practice. And you would think that would have been the end because we had a booming practice, but as often when you first take over practice, about a third of the patients you lose just because it's not the same doctor anymore. And then, but we were making money finally. We were finally making some money. And right there is, student loans. And I was just saying to somebody today, they wanted like $1,500 a month from each one of us. I laughed. I was like, I don't know where you think you're going to get that from. We don't have that kind of money. Can we pay you less? Can we do a payment plan or something? And this has drastically changed as well now in our country, thankfully. But the answer was no. You have to pay $1,500, or you can go into default and then you'll make payments. So here I am, as you can imagine, like a total wreck. And by the way, everyone thinks the minute you graduate med school in any way, you have $1 million in your hand. You're rich. Everybody thinks you're rich because you have the doctor in front of your name. Meanwhile, you're poorer than all of them. And the only way to be poorer is to marry someone who did it too. So we have that. And the end of the year came, and it came time to do our taxes, and we had an accountant that was doing our taxes, and he literally came to the office on April 14th and said, "Okay, good. So your taxes are $8,000. Just write a check and send it." And I was like, "You see the bank account, right? Like, you know that there's not $8,000 there. I don't have $8,000." And now I'm a wreck because now I owe the government money, I owe everybody money, and I would say really for the first few years, I'd like to say it ended there, but it didn't, it got worse and worse. And even though we were making money, you need money to live. I always paid my staff first because that was a rule that we had. You never mess with other people's money, and they were doing a job, and so even if we didn't take a paycheck, they got paid. So, it was like, okay, this month we'll pay this bill, and next month we'll pay the other bill, and hopefully we'll just keep it afloat long enough to get there. And little by little, God was faithful. He got us on some insurances. There was one insurance that she took that we couldn't take. It took us, I want to say, years before we finally got on. They're not in a rush to they don't care if it inconveniences the patient because there's not enough doctors there, because then you don't go to the doctor and they don't have to pay the money for that. So they had no sympathy for us, but it worked out through a series of crazy events that my husband worked at a walk-in place one day a week, and the office manager knew someone who worked at that company who got us on. And so that kind of shifted everything a little bit and eased the burden. In the meantime, while all that's going on, I had 3 babies, one each year, February '92, March of '93, and May of '94. So if life's not crazy enough, let's throw some kids in there and really have a good time. But I wanted to say to you, it's okay. I think some of the things that I've learned is it's okay to fail. It's okay, that's part of life. We are all gonna hit a wall someday where something big that you count on is gonna fail, or someone's gonna fail you where you feel like they've let you down. So, I think it's okay. I always say, if you've been in my class, you know I tell you, "Go sit, have your pity party, cry for a while because it's miserable. When stuff is happening to you, you're miserable, and you have a right to feel miserable. It's a horrible thing. Like, horrible things are happening, you feel horrible. That's okay, but don't stay there." Don't stay there. God called us for more than that. And so it was by his strength that I got up. And we did all kinds of other little things because when you're a doctor, you can't go get a job at McDonald's up the block to support yourself because you're the doctor and your patients can't see you there. So it's hard to say, just go get another job. Doing what? Like, what is it that I'm qualified to do where no one's going to see me and connect that? But we did little things like that. I actually taught preschool when my kids were small. I didn't want to put them in regular preschool. I put them in Christian preschool. So I taught preschool so that they could go for free. And we did all kind. And my brother-in-law had a food service business. He actually had concession stands at the beach that we were by for 1 year, and then he had restaurants. And my husband worked in the kitchen, so no one would see him, but he worked. So he worked 2 full-time jobs the whole time that we were raising our kids. And then I started teaching, and even that, I'm trying to think. My girls were in middle school when I went back to teaching, but I became a teacher originally because they had healthcare. And healthcare privately, when you're buying it then, was $12,000 a year from my family. And I just didn't have $12,000 a year to take out of our salary to do it with 3 teenage girls. I was like, "There's no way we're gonna make that." And so, I went and got a salary, and thankfully in New York, the teachers are at when you have your doctorate, are at the highest pay grade. So I made good money fast, but I gave up, I gave up being home a lot more than I was before and doing things like that. My kids, will tell you that was when their worst year ever when my husband, invented vacuum your rug Thursdays, when everybody's room had to have everything off the floor and put away so that they could vacuum the house every Thursday before I got home from work, and he would make them clean. So, but a lot of good came out of all of it. We all learned. My kids have excellent work ethics because they've seen nothing but mommy and daddy do whatever we needed to do to get everything done and to still give them a decent life. And we lived in a very, very affluent area. Looking back, I think, why were we that dumb? Why didn't we move? We had a chance. That woman who bought my practice, um, started a practice, actually came back after being out of school for like 15 years, went back and did an additional residency so that she needed a 2-year residency to practice in Utah where her family was from. She was a Mormon. And then she went back and opened a practice in Utah, and later on invited us to come work for her there for like something like 300,000 a year she was willing to pay. She was making bank because there was nobody there but her. And she said, "I just can't even keep up with all of my patients. I need help." And we looked at the weather, like wherever she was, we looked at the weather, and my husband was like, "Nope, it's like 400 inches of snow a year." We're like, "Nope, that's not us." And so we didn't do that, but we did stay because of the family. My mom had Alzheimer's when I was in school. I often say that if you watch Meredith Gray's life, minus all of the sexual encounters she had, my life was very much like that at that time. My mom was getting worse and worse, and my dad was, my parents were older, and so I knew I had limited time with them, and I don't regret a minute. I'd have been poor all over again if it meant that I got to be the time that I got with them. And my mother-in-law, we lived with my mother and father-in-law. We had an apartment on the side of their house with 5 of us in the tiniest space. I can't even fathom it now when I think back. But it was a little difficult on my girls because, they went to great schools, um, which gave them a great education and helped them go forward. But it was difficult. I said to somebody today, my daughter, one of her best friends in her graduating class, her parents gave her a Lexus with a Coach interior as a graduation present from high school. Could you imagine? Even if I had the money, I wouldn't do that. That's crazy. But that's the kind of people that, and you're doctors, so they think, and here's my poor girls who are like, using, not even iPods at that time. They were using, like, I forget what they were called, something with a Z from Dell, like the knockoffs. So we never had like the original things. But I love that if you ask them today, we were driving one day and my daughter turned to me and she said, "You know what, Mom? I'm so glad we were poor." I'm like, "You are? I wasn't." She said, "Yeah." She said, "You know what? So many people have their priorities wrong, and we really never had that because we didn't have anything else, but I never knew that growing up that we didn't have anything." She said, "You made everything seem so fun that I just thought like everybody lived like this." She said, "When I look back, when all our friends were going to the islands over the summer on vacation, we were having picnics at the park, and it was like the best thing ever. We thought it was the greatest thing." And anytime my brother-in-law, who had all those businesses that my husband worked for, was very successful, still is today, a great man, but in their family, uh, material things were the god of that family. And so if you gave a gift and it didn't have a name brand on it, they didn't even say thank you. Like it was that kind of a thing. And anytime that they got away with stuff, misbehavior or whatever, and my girls would come to me and say like, "Did you see that?" And I would say, "Yes, I did." And I would say, "You know what? When your parents love you, they love you enough to make the effort to stop you from behaving like that. That's love. That's what love is. And that's why we don't let you do those things because that's not love. Love is not a Coach interior Lexus. Love is that old beater out there and teaching you how to pay for things yourself so that you learn the value of your money. Because we all know the things they bought, you take care of, right? The things you purchase with your dollars, you take care of, not the things mom and dad give you. And so it was like that. And I think that I'm glad we failed. In retrospect, I often think that maybe I didn't get the residency because it was a male-dominated world, and I have had someone from the board tell us they were never going to take both of us because we were married. So they were only going to choose one, and he was male. But in honesty, he's a better clinician than I am. My grades were higher, but he was a better clinician. And so I do really feel like that. It's okay to fail. And I think that you're going to find that throughout your life, whether it's that or whether it's moments when you confuse the fact that you're a doctor or you're a nurse or whoever you are, that's who you are. That's not who you are. You're a child of God. That's who you are. Those other things, they're what you do. Those are your jobs, right? You're not better or worse than anybody else because of it. And I think that anytime that it ends up there, God has a wonderful way of humbling us and reminding us of that. And so I think it's okay to fail something. It's okay to fail hard. It was horrible. I can't even tell you really how horrible it was because I've been so blessed since then. But it was really horrible. It was really horrible not having enough money to do everything. To be in, I remember feeling so embarrassed. I owe the government IRS. By the way, later on we got into a payment agreement and paid off the IRS. But now my student loans, I'm still paying them today. I still pay them right now. How crazy is that, right? Because they do really just penalties and interest and every time. So I laugh when people say, "Oh, why should the government let these people with student loans go?" I was so thankful. I think they let go like some of mine. I was like, "Oh yes, thank you. I've been paying this thing for 30 years now. Like how much longer do I have to pay?" But I still love, so I still pay. And I could pay more and get it done sooner, but I have a nice lifestyle now and I kind of like that too. So I do pay. I stay in agreement and do what I have to do. But I think some of the things that you should look at is your finances, how you do it. One of the first priorities of your life should be when you start to have money is paying that off first, so you can be free. So you don't have to live like that, and you don't have to worry about that anymore. Um, it is very hard. Take every advantage that you can take to get past that. You know what I mean? If there's a way, if there's something extra you can do here, being an RA or whatever to earn extra, do it. If that much loans, because I think what happens is, seeing it my own kids, you start to get like, oh, I could take out extra money and get a car because my car's not working that good. You gotta pay that back at ridiculous rates. Don't do that. You know, take the time to do the work to get out of what you have to get out of and learn from other people. Thankfully, most of medicine now is, and that's a good thing and a bad thing. It is a business. So you work for someone else. You don't dictate how many patients you see and when your vacation is and all of the good things that owning your office give you, the freedom of that. But you could. I mean, there are groups that start their own companies that do that. Maybe taking some business classes if you think that you need to add that in there to really learn, or go watch someone run a business, really run it, like the back stuff, not just the front office. Because I knew all the front office. I'd worked for a doctor for years. I knew that part of it. But I don't think I really looked at like the taxes, the thing. One of our seniors who graduated, I spoke to him the other day, and he said, I said, "So what do you think? How have you grown up since you've been here?" And he said, what realizations did you have?" And he said, "Doc Sorry, taxes." I said, "Oh yeah, doesn't that hurt when that comes out of your money?" You know, when you say, "Oh, the government could pay for everything. The government could pay for everything." You know who the government is? Your paycheck. It's coming out of there, so you are paying for that. Um, yeah, I think that's a realization a lot of people come to the first time they get real jobs, that a lot of that money doesn't come to you. But that's I just wanted to share that with you to hopefully step back and look and say, hey, it's not all bad. First of all, I'm more thankful for all of that than anything because it brought me to the Lord. If not one other thing got resolved, I have a mansion waiting for me on the other side. I don't have to worry. Um, but I think that all along through it, and now I feel so incredibly blessed on every avenue, even financially. And I just keep thinking like, oh, this is like, it's almost like payment for all of the heartache and all of the yuckiness I had to go through then. And to watch my three beautiful girls um, do things that I never thought, was possible, to be that happy watching someone do and succeed in their own lives from our mistakes, by the way, from the things we did wrong. Loans was a big one. But I do really think that that medicine is a great field, but you should know fully, like it doesn't mean everything's going to be all pretty and roses because they hand you a doctorate. There's a lot more to life than that, and there's a lot more to you than that. Thank God, right? Well, thanks. You have any questions? Thank you for sharing. You're welcome. I didn't know if that's yes.
So I know you shared a little bit like how hard you had to work, but we ask our students that. So I was just curious, how did you manage your work-life balance? Like, how did you feel supported outside of work? Like, did you have a church community?
Yeah, so I was in New York, so a church community is a very hard community for a New Yorker. I will say we tried many, many, many churches, and I did go to some, but I feel like we laugh. We always say we're Baptist-costal. We're like the music is Pentecostal, but like the focus just on the word of the Baptists. So I think that we did. I think we bounced a little bit too much, I guess, in retrospect. But yes, we did have church community. And I have my older brother who was actually miraculously healed from epilepsy and saved before me. And they were a real support system for us. Like that was a real, and they lived upstate New York on an apple orchard. So it was like, that was our escape. We would go for many years when we couldn't find a church. I didn't even know that there were Christian churches. Like everyone I knew was Catholic or Jewish. That's it. Like there's nothing else there. So I would be like, when he would say go to church, we'd be like, where? Like I remember we found a Christian bookstore. We like thought we had hit gold. Like, and so I think I think I lacked. My brother was a great mentor. We spent a lot of time in Times Square Church, in David Wilkerson's church in the city where Teen Challenge was founded from, and all of that. We spent a lot of time there. But when you think about it, right, 2 hours. We literally used to take all three little kids in the car every Sunday for 2 hours to go upstate to my brother's to go to church and spend the day, and then come home again and do it again the next week too, because we just didn't. For a while, we didn't even know where to go. And then as we started visiting, we did have church family, but I have to say, not nearly as wonderful as the church family I have here. I wish I had that church up there when I was trying to grow through things. I think it would have been a big help. Unfortunately, a lot of the churches that we went to were a lot of, like, Christians, but not really reading the word and living it. And not to judge their salvation, but it was just very different. So whereas I was teaching my kids, and I got radically saved. I was one of those people that, like, once I got saved, Jesus was everything. I didn't want anything that didn't have to do with Jesus in my house. We got rid of TV. The only thing we had, my kids watched videotapes their whole growing up time. They really never even saw TV. My kids never watched Sesame Street. To this day, sometimes I have to hear those things, that I did that to them. But it was just really because we loved the Lord, and I didn't want to fall short. I wanted only to do what I thought would please Him. And so, yes, we went to church. They went to missionettes, and they did all of that stuff, youth group and all of that stuff too. But we did have some issues, like at some of the churches. Like, we started out as Baptists, and then when he heard that we spoke in tongues, we were asked to leave. Um, so we left there. But but we did. We always just kind of made sure that we were reading the word and staying there. That was really everything. So if we had family and community, that was great. But if not, we had the Lord, and that was really kind of all we needed. That's how we looked at it. Except my brother, he was definitely a rock that we leaned on. He was the one I called when I decided to tell my dad that I wasn't going to be Catholic anymore. That was a big thing in my family. That was a big moment. Teresa, my oldest one, was being baptized. I sat through those meetings. I look back now, the poor priest, he was probably saying, "Who let this woman in here?" Every week I had another question for him about baptism and why we were baptizing babies, and I didn't see it in the Bible, and could you show me anything? And finally he just said, "Laura, we're not fundamentalists." And I said, "With all due respect, Father Joe, I am. I think it's time for me to leave." I said, "I just don't think I can't see this happening. I can't promise you I'll raise a Catholic. I don't believe half the things you say. So how can I say that I promise that?" And then I had to go tell my dad, who was the love of my life next to my husband, and that was very trying. But God is faithful, and in the end, my dad actually accepted the Lord before he died as well. So you never know. And again, a church doesn't mean they're not all. I don't believe all Catholics are not saved or anything like that either. But there are a lot of false teachings in it, and I think that I was reading the Word, and for the first time seeing, like, call no man father. All the priests are called father. And where it says, they come to Jesus and they say, "Your mother and brothers are outside." And Jesus says, "Who are they? Who are my mother and brothers? Those that hear the word of God and do it." And I was like, "You mean Mary has no special thing that he comes running at her call?" Uh, that's a big thing in Catholicism. And to this day, I have a sister who says, she understands because she's the mother. And I think, he's God. How does he not understand? He created you. But the struggle. So I definitely, yes, I did lean on church family, but probably more my brother than them. I did have a few good friends. When we left, I felt like, we had different church friends from different places that we all still kept in touch with. And one of my very best friends, who I went to podiatry school with and graduated with, and she actually became a teacher before I did, for similar reasons, because her husband was disabled, and so her practice wasn't growing fast enough either. And we're still friends today, all these years later. My kids call her Aunt Helen, but she's not really their aunt. But she used to witness to me and challenge my belief. She was really, probably, other than my brother, the person I listened to the most. We would pray for each other on the phone. We didn't see each other. We only lived, like, it would be like the difference from here to Tampa, but we like never saw each other because she had 3 kids too, and we were always crazy busy. But we would call each other constantly and try and get together in the summers, and she was a huge help. Um, so when I struggled when I first started advising, not even here at Polk State. Like I would ask people what they were going into, and I realized like I'm kind of embarrassed about my field. I never like really push it, and that's a shame because it's much different now than it was then. But I always think, had I taken a different path, I would have never met my husband, and my life, and I might have not have come to the Lord. Like I really believe God does everything He does, good and bad, with purpose. There's purpose in the pain always. You don't see it at the time, you see it later, but every time you look through the worst times of your life, there was purpose there, and He brought you through that for a reason. Even if it's only, even my mom's Alzheimer's, that to me was one of the hardest things I ever had to go through in my life. But when I sat with a patient, with a caregiver and a patient, and I turned to that daughter and said, I know what it's like. And then I would say to her, I don't mean like because I'm a doctor. I mean because I was you. My mom was that patient, and I know how it feels to watch them forget or to be angry. My mother cursed at me and used words I didn't even know my mother knew, let alone would say them out loud. So I think no, I don't regret a minute of it. I really don't. I think every single part of it, it had to be. It had to be. I was way too proud to have come to him any other way. He needed that. And to meet my husband. My husband was engaged. You might even know that story. My husband was engaged when I met him. And I often say that to him. So you're sorry now you didn't just marry Elise? I mean, it was March when he kissed me for the first time, and they were supposed to get married in June. So it was a big scandal. But no, because God had different plans for us that we didn't see at that time. We're married now 35 years. It's gonna be 36 this year. Long time.
You have to do continuing ed in your field, like
Yes. So every year we had to go. I think they do. I forget what it is now. I think it was you had to go to one weekend a year, and that would cover it. I think it's 18 credits a year if you did it. So we originally started going in New York to like the New York Marriott. They would have it, or the Hilton. But it was always in the coldest weekend of the year too. It was always like Super Bowl Sunday because I guess they got it cheap. Or who wants a conference on Super Bowl Sunday? Or the week after. So it was in February, it was freezing. And then one year, I don't know, my husband said, you know what, we're spending a fortune going to this. Why are we not going away doing these? And so we started going. We went to Vegas one year, which that was an eye opener. But we had fun. We had a good time. We went and did kind of non-Vegas things, but we had a good time. And then we started coming to Disney. We started coming to the one down here because we were big Disney fans, and we used to come here anyway. And so him and I would come, and no kids. We would leave the kids with my mother-in-law, God bless her, and we would come down and go and pick the sessions we wanted to go to, and the rest of the time we'd be at Disney. So yeah, you did have to do CMEs, or later on we could do them online. Ray was a big computer guy before. Like he was one of the first people on the internet before people really knew what it even was. He was on and doing stuff and building computers and all kinds of crazy things. So once they came out with like ways to do it online, we did them online, but we still came to Disney every year. We still took our vacation. Yeah, every medical field you have CMEs. It doesn't matter what your field is, everybody has them. Yeah, because medicine changes constantly. You'd have to know. Thanks, guys. I'm so glad you're all here. It made me feel better. I was like, well, I hope somebody shows besides Chris Ahmed. I was like, maybe it'll be me and him. Now it'll be awkward. You're welcome.